we don't know exactly what food keepers and their families would have been eating at the light station from day to day. But we do know that flour was one of the provisions that they received. So keepers' wives likely would have made some kind of bread. Now the recipe I'm going to use today comes from an 1869 edition of a cookbook. It's not necessarily the cookbook that keepers' wives would have had, but it is a similar recipe to lots of other bread recipes that were available at the time. And it uses some very simple ingredients that our keepers' families would have had access to. The first ingredient that we're going to use is flour. I'm using unbleached all-purpose flour because that's likely more similar to what they would have had. They would have had white flour like this, maybe not exactly the same, and it would not have been commercially bleached in the 1880s. The next thing that we're going to use is milk. Our keepers and their families did keep cows at the light station. Unfortunately, we don't have cows at the light station now, so I don't have milk straight from a cow for this recipe. Same goes for the butter. Probably would have been churned fresh from cow's milk, but mine is not. And then the next ingredient that we have is yeast. There's all kinds of different methods for making yeast that Victorian bakers would have used. Some involved using things like potatoes and hops. Other methods involved fruit to make yeast, but I'm going to use my sourdough starter, which is basically just made from water and flour. And we know that sourdough starters were common at this time and had been brought to the West Coast on the Oregon Trail and through the California Gold Rush. So it is conceivable that our keepers' families might have had a sourdough starter that they would have used. And the last ingredient that we're going to use is salt. So let's get to the recipe. The recipe here is in kind of a paragraph format. It doesn't have exact steps, but we're going to kind of break it down into steps as we go through it. First, we're instructed to rub 2 ounces of butter into 2 pounds of flour. I'm going to use half that much since I don't need that many rolls. We have the butter cut in pieces, and I'm going to use my hands to mix it into the flour until it has a sandy quality, with no big butter chunks. Next, we're told to stir in as much boiling milk as will make a soft dough. I used about 1.5 cups, but the amount of liquid you need depends on conditions like humidity. We want it to be soft so that it's easily mixed, but not too sticky. I ended up adding a little bit more flour because mine was pretty sticky. When it is cold enough, we're told to add half a teacup of yeast and a little salt. I'm adding more yeast than asked for because I'm not sure how active my starter is compared to yeast that they would have used. Then salt, and then we beat it well with a spoon. Then it tells us to let it rise as long as bread. So I'm going to cover it and put it in a warm place and come back later today once it's risen considerably. Now it says to mold them out in pans and bake as other rolls. Since I know that usually you let rolls rise again, I'm going to shape them, put them in my buttered cast iron skillet, and put them back in the warm place. And now our rolls are ready to bake. Modern ovens are different from what keepers' families would have had, but we'll try 375 degrees and watch them carefully to make sure they don't brown too much. And now here they are, soft rolls, Victorian style. Woo! Let's taste them. Okay. Pretty good, looks pretty good. And tastes delicious.